Hello and welcome to this special interview with Mr. DREWERY DYKE, the Director of International Relations at Salam for Democracy and Human Rights. Hello, Mr. DREWERY.
Thanks for having me.
Nabil Rajab was sentenced on 31st of December, and his charge was related to his right to freedom of opinion and expression. What's your take on the verdict?
The conviction of Nabil Rajab is grossly unfair. It doesn't stand up to international scrutiny. It's been commented as much by human rights organizations, the UN, human rights bodies within the UN, of course. The charges are based, as you say, on the legitimate or protected conduct of the exercise of freedom of expression. Simply put, he's a prisoner of conscience and should be released immediately and unconditionally. And just one other thing I'll just add on this point is I was speaking to his son on the day of the Adam Rajab, and he was saying, look, I spoke to my dad earlier in the course of the day, and he said, look, I knew this was coming, it was expected and so on, but he said what we really need to focus on are the young people and what access they have to information and their ability to fulfill kind of the human rights aspirations of the next generation. And I thought that was quite a fitting, a suitable kind of representation of what Nabil Rajab is all about.
Okay. What happened with Rajab is not the only case. Expressing opinion, even if on Twitter, has turned into a crime in Bahrain, as happened in many cases such as former MP Ali Al-Ashiri and a number of citizens. Is Twitter a crime?
Look, use of Twitter to express peaceful expression, peaceful opinion, and so on, is de facto the exercise of this legitimate right of expression. It's not a crime. Of course, countries like Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and a few others have this specified crime in their cybercrime law about misuse of the telephone. I mean, it is true, it is possible to commit a crime in the sense of inciting to violence, inciting to
hatred,
racial hatred, and so on. And there are people who do that, definitely. Public order is kind of a movable concept. But look, by and large, the people who exercise their right to freedom of expression, basically all over the Gulf, by and large, are generally not inciting to violence, inciting to hatred, racial hatred, or anything like this. It's criticism of governments, criticism of policy, expressions of discontent about conduct of governments, and so on. None of these things really stack up, and they don't amount to internationally recognizable criminal offenses. So Twitter, in that regard, is certainly not, use of it is not a crime.
Bahrain has laws that criminalize the peaceful exercise of freedom of expression. Forming associations and peaceful assembly, including Article 216 of the Penal Code. Is a member of the Human Rights Council, Bahrain, entitled to criminalize freedom of opinion and expression?
The membership of the Human Rights Council is a problematic issue, definitely. And it is the case that there are members of the Human Rights Council who do unfairly criminalize, have unfair laws, have unfair procedures in the administration of justice. That's kind of no two ways of getting around it. It's a flaw, a significant flaw in the system. Of course, countries are obliged to uphold international standards, and indeed they should do so. Squaring Bahrain's legal procedures, its laws, the administration of justice with its position on the Human Rights Council is difficult, it's challenging. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, those in the human rights field, those of us who are interested in seeing a kind of a better future really for everyone. I think we need to take action and kind of show the hypocrisy to, United States, to United Kingdom, countries of the European Union, and so on, and indeed other countries in the Gulf, that these double standards don't benefit anyone.
Opposition leader Sheikh Ali Salman was sentenced to life imprisonment due to a malicious case, and the United Nations considered him as a prisoner of conscience. How did you see the sentence against him?
My understanding of Ali Salman's case is that, in fact, the basis of this charge, i.e., spying for Qatar and being linked to Qatar in this way, I think it's, if I've understood the situation correctly, he was trying to look for ways and
mediate.
To mediate, exactly, to look for a solution in what was an intractable problem in Bahrain at the time. Completely noble and justifiable aspiration and completely understandable. The fact that he's then been criminalized and marginalized and given this incredibly mind-blowing sentence of life imprisonment is it really is it dismays us, it shocks us, and it seems to be an expression, sadly, of this politics of extirpation, this politics of neutralizing and silencing people and indeed civil society in Bahrain. It's not sustainable.
More than a year has passed since Al-Wasat, the only independent newspaper in the country, was shut down. Dozens of journalists remain in jail or were deprived of their nationality. What is your opinion about press freedom in Bahrain?
No, again, this is yet another tragic upside to a kind of politics of despair, in which extirpation, in which silencing and neutralizing and marginalizing is a core policy of the government. The media have an important role in every society in order to call to account, to question, to pose the questions that maybe politicians aren't in a position to pose. And frankly, it makes for a better, more accountable, more open, more efficient society. And if the media and other people kind of connected to the media feel unable to ask questions relating to how the government runs its business, then the government will be in for a very rough time. It does not improve policy. It tends, I think history has shown us, it tends to make people over time poorer morally, poorer psychologically, and actually poorer in money terms, in terms of how policy is implemented.
Do you consider the dissolution of WAD and Al-Wifaq associations as part of the authorities' project to restrict freedom of opinion, especially in light of implementing political isolation laws on the oppositions, against the oppositions?
Yeah, again, this politics of extirpation, politics of silencing and closing down civil society, the civil space, the space for discussion. Banning these sort of organizations, banning groups that offer a kind of legitimate opposition, a peaceful opposition, an opposition that merely is loyal and calls the authorities to account. It really is a politics of despair. It's a race to the bottom, and it will not serve. History's shown us that situations like that do not serve the country in the long term. As I say, both in terms of the morality of the situation, but just in the straightforward administration of the place.
Okay. Do you consider banning religious freedoms, such as the right to practice Friday prayers, to be a denial of freedom of expression due to the close relationship between freedom of expression and freedom of religion?
Look, all these issues relating to Friday prayer gatherings, and what people say in them, and the function, the process, what they embody in terms of a state. It goes without saying that these sort of gatherings, not only in the context of religious freedom, but just straightforward, as you say, freedom of expression, they're fundamental rights, and the people need to be able to fulfill them, to exercise those rights. And indeed, it's something that the government of Bahrain itself has signed up to as a state party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Well, in light of the absence of freedom of expression in Bahrain, what do you advise activists and all those trying to express their opinion in a climate, in a climate controlled by an oppressive grip?
Look, I'm not Bahraini. I don't live in Bahrain. I know I have many friends who are Bahraini and who are active in the scene there. So really, kind of far be it from me to say, look, what's right, what's wrong, and what's so on. But I think broadly, experience has shown that the courage that those individuals have to constantly bring forward these issues about human rights, about expression, is for the benefit of society. And I guess I would just want to pay respect and honor them in terms of the struggles that they face, and just wish them the very best, and know that we've got their backs in trying to support them, albeit from the outside. But how they go about their business and advice to them, really that's their call. But I think it's our duty to support these brave human rights defenders.
Okay. What's your message to the government of Bahrain?
The government of Bahrain, the message to the government of Bahrain is no different to any other government, frankly. It's really to adhere to international standards in terms of human rights. There is a conduct, a way of being that facilitates open discourse, that is not criminalized, that doesn't seek to marginalize or isolate a political opposition or indeed activists. And that if that were to be facilitated and opened up again, as indeed has been in recent years, I think it's really for the better of everyone. And indeed, I think there are people in the government of Bahrain, or I hope there are anyway, who see that this race to the bottom, this kind of politics of extirpation and despair, is actually not going to serve them very long. It's not sustainable.
Okay, my final question, Mr. Drury. After a few days, specifically on the 13th of February, the Bahrainis will commemorate the memory of their peaceful revolution. A message from you to the opposition and to those people who have maintained their peaceful revolution throughout this period, despite the repression machine that's haunting them.
Look, again, far be it from me, a Canadian guy who lives far away, to give advice to people living in a very, very difficult and challenging situation. As I say, we've got their back. We're supporting them. We want to support the people who are in that situation, and everyone, all the people and governments, the government concerned, must do their utmost to adhere to international standards of human rights. And in terms of the conduct of freedom of expression, assembly, and so on, it is a natural wish of some of these individuals to want to get together and commemorate a very difficult recent past. 8 years of incredibly difficult times when people have paid the price, ultimate price, death, and scores of people have been tortured and so on. Over 700 people have had their citizenship stripped. It's an awful situation, and the government really needs to re-engage, allow those people who are there now, enable them to express their opinion, and just re-engage with the people to make the Bahrain of tomorrow, the Bahrain of the future, for the children of today, to make that a more agreeable prospect than what it is at the moment.
Well, we have reached the end of our interview. Mr. Drury, thank you very much. Dear viewers, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Mr. Drury.
Thanks, man. Thanks.